Hello, everyone. This is Victor Reyes from Finlight. I hope you have been a really great time this week. It's for me to show you the new features that we have developed with version 6 on regards timeline. I need to mention something that we recently released the version 6 of Baselight Look. Together with me is Bob in the background. If you want to have any questions or have any inquiries, please do so. Without any further ado, let me show you the tutorial.
This time is for me to show you the new features of Baselight version 6 with regards to the timeline that we have implemented and improved. Although the timeline looks a bit the same, in reality we have minimalistic changed its look and operation. Also, by the time the project gets complex, the new features are incredibly helpful in explaining, categorizing, dividing, editing, and organizing each part of the workflow. The timeline, like in another software, is the canvas map where you're going to build up the city of grades. The timeline in Baselight contains all the shots of the scene. The first impression that we are seeing here is not only the new buttons on top of the timeline, but also a label called Tracks. Tracks is a new feature added in Baselight version 6 that we are going to talk about that later in greater detail, its usage and purpose. So for now, we're going to focus only in the timeline, its usage, and it has now many interesting properties. To begin with, a timeline by description by itself exposes the shots and grades of a scene based in time information. You can notice the time code of a scene and the frames of the playhead. If you like to change the time units to, let's say, depending of what info would you like to display, frames or time code in frames, you can click on the top menu, Views, in the General tab and see the options in the time units enabled. For default, frames and timecode are enabled. Also, you can change the start timecode there. For example, we have by default to start with 01 or 1 hour ahead, but you can change to start with 00 hours. So the timecode will turn into 00 hours, 00 minutes, 00 seconds, and 00 frames. But if you like to change this behavior on new scenes that you create, you can change this at the Baselight menu, Setups, or also known as a BL Setups. Click on Show Editor of your current enabled video setup, and at the New Scenes tab, you can change there the start timecode. Something that is important to remember is that the output timecode is not necessarily the same time based as the scene's workspace. For example, a 24 frames per second scene with a 25 frames per second timecode, so the displayed timecode will not match the actual playback time. But that's not necessarily a problem, it's just how the timeline will be presented for you. In this version of Baselight 6, we have added the timeline button bar at the top. This will help you to operate the timeline and change the way it will react while copying or pasting grades, editing, and moving around the timeline at certain speed and so on. These are the timeline buttons for playback, forward or backward, jump to a previous cuts or next cuts, jump to a scene head or tail, or loop on what we need to play and revise during our grading. Clicking over the 1 multiply icon if you want to change the speed, if you want to go faster. You can change to another option here. Clicking on the zoom button, it will give you options to interact with the current scene or shot, or selecting between marks as the next example. It doesn't give you more options as in filters, what we are going to talk about in a minute. We have in Baselight something called timeline zoom. The timeline zoom is at the very right, where is a percentage icon or button, which shows you the timeline zoom to what is set to. Clicking it over, the handy and the most useful is fit to screen or F7. Notice that the menu also shows you the shortcut for the keyboard like almost all buttons from the menu bar in Baselight, so fit to screen and the rest are not excluded. Also, if you like to interact more freely with the timeline, you can do it with the mouse or in your Mac. Simply press Option and Command, click with the tracking path, and drag to the upper and right direction to zoom in as you like. See, if you zoom out the timeline, the zoom percentage will be less than 1, and this is because it shows part of the timeline where there's no info at all. The next button is Filters. It gives you the option to select what you want to see in a timeline. By default, you can filter all shots, graded, and current tape, but as you can notice, I prepare some custom filters that could help you in many ways. For example, it can help you to focus in a particular set of shots. Also, it could help you to project those selected shots in a range in the timeline so you can interact more focus in a range of this selection instead of interacting with the whole timeline. One way to create custom filters is by going at the very bottom of the menu, select Edit Filters button, and it will take you straight to a shot view. See that the tabs on top are the filters created in the timeline. It's very easy to create filters, but we want to focus about timeline for now. We will describe in greater detail about how to create more complex filters in another tutorial. At the very left of the timeline, you can see Paste, selected with Grade Replace. If you click on it, it will give you a list of many options to show the interaction and behavior while copying grades. These are pretty explicit in how to copy-paste will be performed. Notice that you can also find these options from the Edit menu at the Copy-Paste Apply Options button in the menu. This is just another shortcut for the former. Copy and paste will be covered in detail in another tutorial. Next, there are some icons that represent a shortcut of the previous buttons. This is to interact faster with the timeline. For example, this one, Protect Destination Matte, means that it will not overwrite matte in the destination from the copy source. For example, the next is Primary Grade Layers Only. That will omit matte to be copied but only primaries, like the following. The keyframe icon means that the keyframes will be pasted if the source grades have animation that want to be copied to the next shot. The errors here, or the maintain tracks for paste strip settings button, works in the following way. See that we have 3 tracks on this particular timeline. Input layer is in track 1, in track called V1, a second layer in track 2 as V2, and a third layer in track 3, V3. Next to it, there's an empty stack in layer 1 with the same footage. So if the maintain tracks error is enabled, the strips will be pasted to the correct track similar to the source stack. If not, the source strips grades will be added in the first track, or V1. We also will be covering this topic about tracks in an incoming video of this training tutorial. The apply button, it simply will copy the grades directly from the dark blue square selection in the cut views. Last but not least is the edit button. This is a new feature that we have added in Baselight version 6. By clicking on it in the timeline, we'll turn into a new edit mode for a quick online task. By pressing Shift and Enter, this will be enabled and toggle back by pressing the icon or the shortcut. We have redesigned the way we could edit timeline scene in version 6, making it more friendly and explicit, but for now, we're going to continue talking about the timeline as an overview. Now, describing how to work with the timeline, we need to mention something very briefly. The playhead in Baselight are called cursors. In Baselight, we feed the image display from the timeline via the cursors, or these. These are the cursors. You can add more than one cursor on a scene, or they can be also on different scenes. To add a cursor, this is just by the shortcut pressing Command plus 1, Command plus 2, 3, 4, or up to 9. Need to mention that this can be also added in a Linux Baselight system by pressing Ctrl plus the number. There are up to 9 cursors in total. Cursors can be used as a way to switch between or compare different scenes. Multiple cursors within the same scene can also be compared in different places in the timeline, or different layers in the stack at the current frame. We need to mention this as an overview, as this is part of how to work with a timeline, and we're going to explain this in a more efficient way in a real case scenario in a cursor tutorial. We have added new shortcuts in Baselight version 6, and this is to move the playhead of the cursor. And this is by pressing the keys J, K, and L. So J will play backwards, K will stop or play, and L will play forwards. Now, if you want to go faster forwards, just press twice or 3 times, and you will see how the cursor of the playhead will go faster, and the same goes with J. If you press that several times, it will go backwards. There are more shortcuts in the Baselight user guide or in the Baselight shortcuts here in Baselight. So that will help you to move around, but I want to show you that in the following slide if you want to just pause the video and take note of them. To make the cursor go 1/4 more faster or half more faster, you can also click over these icons. These are basically to speed up sometimes the reviewing. But now you know the new shortcut that can speed you faster, that is JKLL, that we have added now in version 6 of Baselight. Something useful when you have available a keyboard with a numerical path is to change the navigation of a timeline, to move based on frame number or timecode. First, you need to enable the keypad to be in navigation mode, and this is by clicking at the Edit menu button, Numeric Keypad Mode, and select Navigation. To work with this feature, just by tapping in the keypad, it will take you to a specific timeline frame. Now, if you press in the numeric keypad 0, Baselight will enable the mode to go to a specific point in timeline based in timecode. And to make this even more interesting for you, just type 0 first and then type 10 to move forward 10 frames in timecode, and you keep pressing the plus key in your keyboard and it will move along the same amount of frames every time. And also you can move backwards 10 frames every time you press minus button in your numeric keypad. Something that also appear on the timeline are these small yellow bars at the left and or right of the timeline, which are indicates where the cursor is. We call those cursor off-screen indicators. The yellow bars appears when you select the strip or strips that are off the screen. If you have moved it out of the visible section of the timeline, the blue bars appear and it will show you where the cursor is. You can click over there and it will take you straight to where the cursor is parked. You can start using the timeline in many different ways. The most basic is by adding media from Flux Manage, and this is for testing or manipulate files that need to be graded or changed. But if you are part of a workflow, a conform is needed to be done. So, in order to add media, simply go and click on Views and select Flux Manage, that is also known as a sequence management. And once it's open and you get the location of the folder of where the media is, simply click on any one. You can see also at the bottom at the Flux Manage that there are 4 new buttons introduced in Baselight version 6. Just add some media by double-clicking any media file. Then keep the container and don't apply any LUT camera for now. The media will be added and seen at the image display in the back. Also notice that by double-clicking in the Flux Manage button, it will do the same as clicking on the Overlap Insert button. Now, if we select a second media file and I click on Append, it will be added next to the previous or last shot. Now, in Flux Manage, if we mark in and mark out some frames and we select now Ripple, or click on the Ripple button, the media will be added between the two shots. Basically, what happens is that the Ripple mode will add the new media, but it will create a cut at the cursor point and ripple the existing media to the right of the cursor so nothing is overwritten in the timeline. Let's press Ctrl or Command Z to redo our last change and select Overwrite. Overwrite will also add a cut in the cursor position, but it will not ripple existing media in the timeline. So the media will overwrite existing frames to the length of the new video. Now, if you manually select a strip in the timeline so it has a yellow glow, then the overwrite button becomes replace button. In this case, only the amount of new media will be added to replace the selected shot. Additional frames from the Flux Manage selection will not be added to the timeline. Let's press Ctrl Z or Command Z back again until we have only 2 shots. Let's move the cursor a bit forward in the same shot and by the marked in frames and the marked out frames, select overlap. By doing so, the original shot will move upwards and the new media below. And this is for the case we like to add some dissolve or any other operation that will require 2 inputs of media for our ratings, like the following example. Or like we said before, to add more media, we can simply do a conform process, which is normally used to place the required shots in the current places in the timeline. Like this. This is a simple task of a conform. Conform will be added in the following days for these training session tutorials. To finalize this tutorial, I would like to show you some nice features about layers that has to do with the timeline. We know that Baselight is based on layers, right? Just to recap, the first layer is always the layer that will have the media on it, and we call that input layer. Moreover, the input layer is also called layer 0, and this is because you can add operators in the input layer and not seen in the timeline. For example, if we click here and says append in row, we can add any operator and will not appear in the timeline. When we have added some layers by pressing P or layer 1, 2, 3, or 4 in your blackboard or slate, they will be added below the input strip. each layer is called a strip. And a bunch of layers, even if there's no layers, is called stack. Now, in Baselight version 6, we have added another graph descriptor which imposes an explicit path of how it's going to be affecting or how it's working down the stream the layers. But not only that, but also, depending on how is the stack composed, there's now arrows where you can collapse the whole stack completely, or collapse by strips, or via the new tracks, the whole video track.
The way to unfold or unfold using the shortcut is by pressing the command and backslash.
Or to fold all the shots, just pressing all together Alt plus backslash key, and it will collapse the whole stack. And it doesn't stop there. In tracks, if you click over the sandwich icon or the squash track, all together with command or control, it will collapse the rest of the stacks to focus in a specific track and the stack in the timeline. This is very useful.
We will be covering working with layers, stacks, and tracks in another tutorial.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining this. I hope that this video have given you a really clear vision of the capabilities that we have added in version 6. Many features that includes about how to work with tracks, the new edit mode, and how to conform will be in a more advanced video. We are doing a lot of tutorials now, and I hope that you have any questions. Please don't hesitate to send it to us through an email, to support, through our socials, and so on. So thank you guys, and have a good one. Bye bye.